At my husband's funeral, my daughter-in-law Harper whispered with a laugh, "Let her pay for the coffin and join him." I smiled silently, but what she didn't know was that I still kept her secret from 7 years ago. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. The church was filled with a somber quiet, broken only by the occasional sniffle and the minister's steady voice. Rain tapped gently against the stained glass windows, as if George had ordered the weather himself to match the mood. 50 years of marriage ended by a heart attack on our back porch while he drank his morning coffee. I sat in the front pew, my hands folded tightly in my lap to stop them from trembling. Our son James sat beside me, his face a mask of grief. I'd spent so much energy worrying about him that I'd barely processed my own feelings. The minister spoke of George's dedication to his family, his business, his community. Words that should have comforted me, but all I could think about was how empty the house would feel tonight. How I'd never again hear him grumble about the neighbor's dog, or watch him fall asleep in his favorite chair with the newspaper covering his face. As the service concluded, people began to shift in their seats. I felt a hand on my shoulder, our son helping me to my feet. My knees had stiffened during the hour-long service. Another unwelcome reminder of my 70 years. "Let's go, Mom," James whispered, his voice thick with emotion. We moved toward the casket for one final goodbye. I placed my hand on the polished wood, cool beneath my fingertips. "Goodbye, my love," I whispered. That's when I heard it, a voice from behind me, not quite as hushed as it should have been. Harper's voice, speaking to her brother who had flown in for the funeral. "Let her pay for the coffin and join him," followed by a barely disguised snicker. I didn't turn around. I didn't gasp or cry out. Years of being a business owner's wife had taught me how to maintain composure even when shocked or hurt. But inside, something hardened. Something that had been soft and forgiving for too long. James hadn't heard. He was speaking quietly with the minister, arranging the final details for the burial tomorrow. I was grateful for that small mercy. He had enough pain to deal with without knowing how his wife truly felt about his mother. As we walked toward the church doors, mourners stopped to offer condolences. I nodded, thanked them, let them embrace me. All while my mind replayed Harper's words and traveled back 7 years to the day I discovered her secret. I had gone to George's office to bring him lunch, a surprise on our anniversary. The receptionist said he was out meeting a client, but I could wait in his office. While there, I noticed the computer screen hadn't gone to sleep. A string of emails was visible. Emails between Harper and Richard Whitman, our company's accountant. Innocent enough, I thought at first. Until I read more. Plans, details, amounts, money being siphoned from company accounts. And worse, Harper's clear manipulation, her willingness to use her position as James's wife to gain access, her contempt for George and me, whom she called the old fools who wouldn't notice a few missing dollars. I printed those emails. I confronted Richard privately. He broke down, confessed everything, begged me not to tell George or James. He claimed Harper had initiated it, had threatened to claim he had made advances toward her if he didn't cooperate. I should have exposed them both. But James had just been named vice president of the company. The publicity would have destroyed him, tainted his new position, and the grandchildren. They were so young then. What would it do to them to see their mother disgraced? So I made a deal with Richard. Return every cent. Resign quietly, citing health reasons. And never contact Harper again. In return, I would keep silent. He agreed readily, pathetically grateful for the chance to avoid prosecution. As for Harper, I said nothing. George never knew. James never knew. I watched Harper play the devoted wife and daughter-in-law for 7 years, all while knowing what she was capable of. I kept the emails, the bank records, everything, locked away in a safe deposit box that not even George knew about. Now, as I walked out of the church into the rain, I felt James place George's umbrella over me. Harper walked ahead of us, already. On her phone, probably complaining to someone about having to attend this depressing event. I had overheard her call it that yesterday. Tomorrow would be the reading of the will. Harper had been hinting for weeks about what would happen to the house and how the company shares would be distributed. Always practical matters, never grief or memories or concern for me. She thought I was just a grieving old woman with no fight left in me. She was wrong. What she didn't know was that George and I had updated our will 6 months ago after his first health scare. What she didn't know was that I still had all the evidence of her betrayal. What she didn't know was that the sweet, accommodating mother-in-law she had manipulated and dismissed for years had finally reached her breaking point. The rain fell harder as we reached the cars. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow everything would change. 7 years earlier, the day had started like any other. I remember it was our 43rd anniversary, and I had prepared George's favorite sandwich, pastrami on rye with that spicy mustard he loved so much. We hadn't made any special plans for the evening yet, and I thought surprising him at lunch might give us a chance to decide together. The office building that housed Holloway Construction stood tall in the business district, a testament to George's 40 years of hard work. The receptionist, Belinda, had been with the company for nearly 20 years and greeted me with a warm smile. "Madison, what a lovely surprise," she said, rising from her desk. "George just stepped out for a meeting with the Westridge developers. He should be back in about an hour." "That's fine, dear. I'll just wait in his office," I replied, lifting the lunch bag. "I brought our anniversary lunch." Belinda's face softened. 43 years, isn't it? That's wonderful. George's office was exactly as I expected, meticulously organized yet lived in. Photos of our family dotted his desk, including a recent one of our grandchildren at the lake house. I set the lunch down and decided to tidy up a bit while waiting. That's when I noticed his computer screen. George always forgot to lock it or shut it down. I moved to do it for him when an email caught my eye. It was from our company accountant, Richard Whitman, to Harper. My daughter-in-law had no official role at the company. Why would the accountant be emailing her? I shouldn't have looked. I'd never been the type to snoop. But something about the subject line, "Re-Next Transfer," made my stomach tighten. The email chain was extensive, dating back nearly 6 months. As I scrolled through, my hands began to shake. Richard and Harper had been systematically moving small amounts of money from company accounts to a separate one, small enough not to raise immediate alarms, but over time, they had taken nearly $200,000. "I'm worried G is starting to notice the discrepancies," Richard had written. "We should pause for a month." Harper's reply chilled me. "The old fools won't figure it out. Jay never looks at those accounts, and G is too busy playing golf with his cronies to check the details. Another $50K and we can stop. I need that investment capital." I felt physically ill. The betrayal was staggering, not just of the company, but of James, of George, of me. We had welcomed Harper into our family with open arms. We had helped them buy their first home, celebrated the birth of their children, included her in every family tradition. And all the while, she'd been stealing from us, mocking us. I printed the emails with shaking hands. Then I checked the accounting files that were accessible from George's computer. The evidence was all there, small discrepancies, carefully hidden but undeniable when you knew what to look for. I left before George returned, the lunch forgotten on his desk. I couldn't face him yet, not with this knowledge burning inside me. Instead, I drove to Richard's small office on the other side of town. He looked up in surprise when I entered, his expression quickly changing to fear when he saw my face. "Mrs. Holloway, don't," I said, placing the emails on his desk. "Just tell me why." He crumbled immediately, tears forming in his eyes. It was her idea. She approached me after the Christmas party last year, said she needed capital for some investment opportunity. She promised it would be temporary, that she'd pay it all back before anyone noticed. And you believed that? My voice was ice. No, he admitted, looking at his hands. But she said if I didn't help her, she'd tell James I had made inappropriate advances toward her at the party, that I'd tried to. You know, she had photos of us talking closely. She said she could make it look like whatever she wanted. I believed him. That manipulation, that calculated cruelty, it fit with the Harper I was now seeing, not the Harper I thought I knew. She'll destroy James if this comes out, I said, more to myself than to Richard. And the grandchildren. I thought of Emma, only 5, and Liam, just turning 8. They adored their mother. This would shatter their world. Please, Mrs. Holloway, Richard begged. I'll do anything. I have savings, I can pay it back. Please don't tell Mr. Holloway. I made my decision then, not to protect Harper, but to protect those I loved most. Return every cent by the end of the month. Resign immediately, citing health concerns. Cut all contact with Harper. If you do these things, I won't go to George or the police. He agreed instantly, pathetically grateful. I left his office with copies of all the evidence, which I later stored in a safe deposit box at a bank across town. I never told George. I couldn't bear to see the pain it would cause him, the doubt it would cast on his relationship with James. Instead, I watched silently as Richard returned the money and left the company. I watched as Harper feigned surprise at his departure, as she continued playing the role of devoted wife and daughter-in-law. For 7 years I carried that secret. Sometimes when Harper would make a cutting remark disguised as concern, "Madison, should you really be handling the Thanksgiving dinner at your age?" I would feel the weight of what I knew pressed down on me. When she would sigh dramatically about money being tight, even as she wore designer clothes and took luxury vacations, I would think of those emails. But I kept silent. For James. For Emma and Liam. For George, who trusted his son's judgment in choosing a wife. For the sake of family peace. Now, as I stood in my bedroom the night after George's funeral, staring at my reflection in the mirror, I wondered if I had made the right choice. The hollow-eyed woman looking back at me seemed to ask, what had that silence really protected? Who had it really served? George was gone now. The grandchildren were older. Liam now 15, Emma 12. Old enough to understand more, but still young enough to be devastated. And tomorrow was the reading of the will. Harper had been circling like a vulture for weeks, making not-so-subtle comments about the house, the company shares, George's investments. Opened my jewelry box and removed a small key. The safe deposit box was still there, waiting. The evidence preserved. Tomorrow, I decided, slipping the key into my purse. Tomorrow, we would see who paid for what. The law office of Bradford and Associates had always intimidated me with its dark wood paneling and the lingering scent of expensive cologne. Today, it felt suffocating. I sat with my back straight, hands folded in my lap, the way George always said a businesswoman should present herself. Yes, even in my grief, I could hear his gentle coaching. You're not just my wife, Madison. You're my partner in everything. Howard Bradford, George's attorney for 30 years, sat behind his massive desk. His silver hair was combed perfectly, not a strand out of place. He'd been at the funeral yesterday, had hugged me with genuine sadness. One of the few people who knew George as I did, the man behind the successful business facade. James sat to my right, his face drawn with fatigue. He hadn't been sleeping well since his father's heart attack. Harper sat beside him, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. She'd done her hair and makeup impeccably, as always, not a hint of genuine grief on her face, just the appropriate mask of somber respect. Thank you all for coming, Howard began, opening a leather folder. As you know, we're here to discuss the last will and testament of George Alexander Holloway. Harper leaned forward slightly, her interest palpable. I'd seen that look before, the carefully concealed eagerness, the calculating gleam in her eye. The same look she'd had at Christmas when eyeing the expensive gifts under the tree. Before I begin, Howard continued, I want to emphasize that George made these decisions with great care and consideration. He revised his will approximately 6 months ago, after his first health scare. I knew this, of course. We had sat in this very office together, discussing every detail. George had been so methodical, so particular about his wishes. It's not about the money, Madison, he had said. It's about legacy, about protection. Harper shifted in her seat. 6 months? Ago? But that seemed so sudden. Was he thinking clearly after his health issues? The implication hung in the air, that I had somehow manipulated a weakened George into changing his will. I kept my expression neutral, though inside, my anger flared. I can assure you, Howard said firmly, George was of sound mind and body. I've known him for decades. He knew exactly what he wanted. Harper fell silent, but her displeasure radiated like heat. Howard continued reading. The initial portions were standard: arrangements for outstanding debts, charitable donations, specific bequests to old friends and loyal employees. Then came the part Harper had been waiting for. Regarding Holloway Construction, Howard read, 51% of shares will remain with Madison Elizabeth Holloway, giving her controlling interest in the company. I heard Harper's sharp intake of breath but kept my eyes on Howard. 25% will go to James George Holloway, with the remaining 24% to be held in trust for his children, Emma and Liam Holloway, accessible upon their 25th birthdays, respectively. What? Harper's voice cut through the room. But James should have controlling interest. He's been working at the company for years. He's the VP. James placed a hand on her arm. Harper, please. Howard cleared his throat. If I may continue. There is more. Harper fell silent, but her face had flushed with anger. I could practically see the calculations happening behind her eyes. Without controlling interest, she couldn't make the major decisions she had likely been planning. She couldn't sell off assets or redirect funds. Regarding the family home and property, Howard continued, it will remain solely in Madison's name during her lifetime. Upon her passing, it will transfer to James, with the stipulation that it cannot be sold outside the family for at least 20 years thereafter. The home, our beautiful colonial with its wraparound porch and the garden I had tended for decades. The place where we had raised James hosted countless Christmases and Thanksgivings. Harper had been dropping hints for years about how it was too large for just one person and how they could help me downsize to somewhere more manageable. The vacation home in Cape Cod will follow the same arrangement. Another property Harper had her eye on. I remembered her casual suggestion last summer. You know, Madison, if you ever decided to sell this place, James and I would love to take it off your hands. Give you one less thing to worry about. Howard continued through the rest of the will, personal items, investments, insurance policies. With each bequest that kept assets under my control, Harper's posture grew more rigid, her expression more fixed. When Howard finished, there was a heavy silence in the room. Are there any questions? He asked. Yes, Harper said immediately. This seems very unusual. From what James told me, the original plan was for him to inherit the controlling interest in the company. What changed? My husband's wishes changed, I said quietly, speaking for the first time since the reading began. After 45 years of building that company together, George wanted to ensure it would remain true to our original vision. Together? Harper's voice was sharp with disbelief. You weren't an executive? You were just his wife. James looked shocked. Harper! It's all right, James, I said, meeting Harper's gaze directly. Your father and I built that company from nothing. I kept the books for the first 10 years. I managed the office while he managed the sites. I hosted the dinners that secured our biggest contracts. Yes, together. Howard nodded. George was very clear about Madison's role in the company's success, hence his decision. Harper turned to James, her voice lower, but still intense. This isn't right. You've dedicated your life to that company. She'll run it into the ground. I stood slowly, gathering my purse. I believe we're finished here, Howard. Thank you for your time. Of course, Madison. Call me anytime. As we left the office, Harper maintained a frigid silence. James walked between us, tension radiating from his shoulders. In the parking lot, he turned to me. Mom, I'm sorry about— It's all right, sweetheart, I said, patting his arm. You should take Harper home. She needs time to process. We can talk tomorrow. As they walked to their car, I heard Harper's voice rise again. This is ridiculous. She can't possibly manage a construction company at her age. We need to contest this. I slipped into my own car, a sense of calm settling over me. Phase 1. Complete, exactly as George and I had planned. Harper had shown her true colors, just as I knew she would. Tomorrow would bring the next phase, and a decision I had been avoiding for 7 long years. The morning after the will reading, I woke. Before dawn, sleep had been elusive, filled with fragmented dreams of George and whispered conversations we'd had about the future, a future he wouldn't be part of now. I made coffee in the quiet kitchen, the house still and empty around me. I found myself talking to him as I often did these days. They reacted exactly as you said they would, George. You always could read people so well. My phone rang at 7:30 a.m. James. I answered immediately, worried about him. Mom? Sorry to call so early. Did I wake you? No, sweetheart. I've been up. Is everything all right? He sighed heavily. Harper's still upset about yesterday. She's convinced there must have been a mistake or that. Well, that you influenced Dad somehow. The accusation stung, even secondhand. Your father made his own decisions, James. He always did. I know that, Mom. I'm not questioning it. I just wanted to apologize for yesterday, for how Harper behaved. You don't need to apologize for her. A pause. She wants to contest. The will. I had expected this. That's her right, of course. But your father's wishes were very clear. I know. I told her that. Another heavy sigh. She's not taking it well. I could imagine. Harper's plans, whatever they had been, were now derailed. The control she thought she would have through James had evaporated. I'd like to stop by today, James said. Just to talk. Maybe go through some of Dad's things. I'd like that. Come. For lunch? Perfect. I'll be there around noon. After hanging up, I made my decision. It was time for the first reveal. Not everything, not yet, but enough to start the process. I went to my bedroom and opened the safe behind the painting George had given me for our 30th anniversary. Inside was a key to the safe deposit box and a sealed envelope. The envelope contained photos taken 3 months ago by a private investigator George had hired. We had suspected Harper was being unfaithful to James, based on odd phone calls and unexplained absences. The investigator had confirmed our fears, documenting her meetings with a younger man at a hotel downtown. George and I had debated whether to tell James. In the end, we decided to wait. It would destroy him right now, George had said. With the company expansion and the stress he's under, let's wait until things settle. But things hadn't settled. Instead, George had died, and now Harper was threatening to contest the will, to potentially tear apart everything we had built. I placed the envelope on the kitchen table and went to shower and dress. James arrived promptly at noon, looking exhausted but managing a small smile. "Smells good in here," he said, hugging me. "Just soup and sandwiches. Nothing fancy." We ate quietly, talking about neutral topics: the grandchildren's school activities, the unusually warm weather, memories of George that made us smile rather than cry. I waited until we had finished eating before bringing up the will. "I know yesterday was difficult," I began. "For all of us." James nodded. "Harper just doesn't understand why Dad made the decisions he did. She thinks it's unfair to me." "And what do you think, James?" He looked surprised by the question. "I trust Dad's judgment. Always have. And I know you'll do what's best for the company." "I will, and for the family." I paused, then continued carefully. "Your father and I were concerned about some things before he passed. About Harper." His expression closed slightly. "Mom, if this is about yesterday, it's not." I got up and retrieved the envelope. "Before I give you this, I want you to know that your father and I struggled with whether to tell you. We didn't want to hurt you. But with Harper threatening to contest the will, I think you need to know." James took the envelope with a confused expression. "What is this?" "Just look, sweetheart." His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. The photos were clear, unmistakable. Harper entering a hotel with a young man, embracing him in the lobby. More intimate photos taken through a window. James stared at them in silence, his face draining of color. When he finally looked up, his eyes were filled with shocked betrayal. Is this why Dad changed the will? He knew about this?" I nodded. "We found out 3 months ago. He hired someone to follow her because we were concerned about her behavior. The late-night calls, the unexplained absences." 3 months, James whispered. "All this time you both knew and didn't tell me?" "Your father was trying to protect you," I said gently. "He knew how much stress you were under with the Westridge development. We were going to tell you after. That project was completed, but then he died." James stood up abruptly, pacing the kitchen. "I can't believe this. All these years, I defended her when Dad questioned her spending, when you seemed concerned about her priorities. I thought you just didn't understand her. I wanted to reach out to him, but I knew he needed space. I'm sorry, James. We only wanted what was best for you." He stopped pacing, his back to me, shoulders rigid. "The man in these photos, do you know who he is?" "No." The investigator didn't identify him. James turned back to me, his expression hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "Is there more that I don't know?" This was the moment, the crossroads I'd been dreading. I could tell him everything now. About the embezzlement 7 years ago. About Richard Whitman's hasty departure. About how Harper had been manipulating and deceiving all of us for years. But looking at his face, already devastated by one betrayal, I couldn't bring myself to pile on another. Not yet. Not all at once. "Your father wanted to protect the company and our family legacy," I said instead. "That's why he structured the will the way he did. He was concerned about Harper's influence and priorities." James nodded slowly, gathering the photos and placing them back in the envelope. "I need to think. I need to process this." "Of course. Take whatever time you need." He hugged me before leaving, holding on tighter and longer than usual. "Thank you for telling me, Mom, for being honest with me." As I watched him drive away, guilt gnawed at me. I hadn't been completely honest. I had revealed one truth while concealing another. But this was just the beginning, the first step in a process that would either heal our family or tear it apart completely. Harper wouldn't go quietly. Of that, I was certain. She had too much to lose now, not just the financial security she craved, but her marriage, her reputation. That night, I received a text from James. Confronted Harper. She denied it at first, then admitted everything when I showed her the photos. "Staying at a hotel tonight. Need space. Love you. I closed my eyes, feeling both vindicated and deeply sad. The partial revelation had done its work. James now saw a glimpse of Harper's true nature. But it had come at a cost. My son was in pain, and there was still more pain to come. Tomorrow would bring the inevitable, Harper's response. And I needed to be ready for it. 3 days passed like a held breath. James stayed at a hotel, texting occasionally to let me know he was all right but needed time. I respected his space, though every maternal instinct urged me to go to him, to comfort him, as I had when he was a child with skinned knees and hurt feelings. But this pain was different, deeper, the kind that reshapes a person. I spent those days at George's desk in the study, reviewing company files, preparing for the board meeting scheduled for the following week. The first meeting where I would officially take George's place as majority shareholder. I found comfort in the familiar numbers, in the projects he had been so passionate about. It was there, surrounded by George's things, that I heard the front door slam open. Hard footsteps across the foyer, heading straight for the study. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. How dare you? Harper's voice trembled with rage. She stood in the doorway, her normally perfect appearance showing signs of strain. Hair pulled back hastily, minimal makeup, dark circles under her eyes. I closed the folder I had been reviewing. I assume James showed you the photos. You manipulative witch. She stepped further into the room. You've been planning this, haven't you? Waiting for George to die so you could destroy my marriage. I didn't take those photos, Harper. You created that situation all on your own. She laughed bitterly. Don't act innocent. You and George never approved of me. You've been looking for ways to turn James against me from day one. I stood, keeping the desk between us. Not out of fear, but to maintain my composure. That's not true. We welcomed you into this family. We supported you, included you in everything. Supported me? Her voice rose. By keeping me under your thumb? By making me grovel for every scrap of recognition? The perfect mother-in-law act might have fooled James, but I always saw through it. Is that why you cheated on my son? Because you felt unrecognized? Her eyes narrowed. My relationship with James is none of your business. It became my business when your actions threatened to hurt him, I said evenly. Just as it became my business when you tried to steal from our company. The words hung in the air between us. Harper's expression froze, then shifted from rage to calculation in an instant. I don't know what you're talking about, she said carefully. I walked to the bookshelf, removed a leather-bound book, and extracted the key I had hidden there. I held it up, watching her reaction. Safe Deposit Box, First National Bank, Box 247. Inside are copies of all the emails between you and Richard Whitman. Bank statements showing the transfers, his signed confession. Her face paled, but her voice remained steady. Ridiculous. You're making things up now to discredit me. 7 years ago, Harper, you convinced our accountant to help you embezzle nearly $200,000 from company accounts. You called us old fools who wouldn't notice a few missing dollars. Ring any bells? She stared at me, her mind visibly racing. Then her posture changed, a hint of smugness returning. If you had actual evidence, you would have gone to the police 7 years ago. You would have told James. You would have told George. I protected my family. I protected my son from knowing the woman he married was a thief. I protected my grandchildren from the public scandal of their mother's arrest. And yes, I protected George from the pain of that betrayal. How noble, she sneered, but also convenient, because now there's no one to verify your story. George is dead. Richard is gone. It's just your word against mine. I couldn't help but smile slightly. Richard isn't gone, Harper. He's living in Phoenix, still very much alive and very willing to testify if needed. The color drained from her face. You're bluffing. Would you like his phone number? I met her gaze steadily. Or perhaps you'd prefer I call James right now and tell him everything. I'm sure the board would also be interested. Especially with the history of embezzlement when they assess your challenge to the will. Her eyes widened slightly. You wouldn't. Try me. We stood in tense silence, each measuring the other's resolve. Finally, Harper spoke, her voice low and dangerous. What do you want? I want you to drop any plans to contest the will. I want you to stop poisoning my son against me. I want you to start behaving like a member of this family instead of a predator circling it. She laughed, but it sounded hollow. And if I do all that, you'll keep your mouth shut about these supposed emails, these alleged transfers? Not alleged. Harper. Real. Documented. Provable. And yes, if you change your behavior, I'll consider maintaining my silence. Consider. She spat the word. So no guarantees. I do what you want, and you still might tell James anyway. I haven't decided yet, I admitted. That depends on you. You're blackmailing me. I'm giving you a chance. More than you deserve. She began pacing, her mind clearly working through scenarios, calculating odds, weighing options. I had seen that same expression when she watched James and George discuss business matters, always assessing, always looking for an angle. James won't believe you, she said finally. We've been married for 15 years. I'm the mother of his children. He loves me. Yes, he does, which is why this will devastate him. But he'll believe the evidence, Harper. The emails in your own words, the bank statements, Richard's testimony. She stopped pacing, turning to face me fully. You've hated me from the beginning. No. I wanted to love you. I tried to love you. For James's sake. For my grandchildren. But you made that impossible. Her eyes narrowed. This isn't over. That's up to you. We stood there, two women with decades between us but equally matched in determination. I saw something shift in her expression. A recognition, perhaps, that she had underestimated me all these years. That the sweet, accommodating mother-in-law, who baked cookies with the grandchildren and hosted family dinners, was also the woman who had helped build a successful construction company from nothing, who had weathered economic downturns and competitor challenges, who had protected her family at all costs. I need to think, she said finally. Take your time, but not too much. The board meeting is Monday. She left without another word, her departure as abrupt as her arrival. I sank back into George's chair, my hands trembling slightly now that the confrontation was over. I hadn't planned to reveal what I knew about the embezzlement, not yet. But Harper had forced my hand. Now a new clock was ticking. She would either concede or escalate, and I needed to be prepared for either outcome. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. It rang 3 times before a hesitant voice answered. Hello? Richard? It's Madison Holloway. I think we need to talk. The Sunday before the board meeting, James called to ask if he could bring the children over. They miss you, he said, his voice weary. And I could use the company too. It had been nearly a week since he'd confronted Harper about the affair. 5 days since Harper had stormed into my study, threatening and then bargaining. 3 days since my conversation with Richard Whitman, who had readily agreed to provide a sworn statement about the embezzlement if necessary. I hadn't heard from Harper directly, but James had mentioned she was staying with her sister. She says she wants to work things out, he'd told me yesterday, uncertainty clouding his voice. Says the affair was a mistake, that she wants another chance. I had said nothing. This was his decision to make, though every maternal instinct wanted, to protect him from more pain. I spent the morning baking, chocolate chip cookies for Liam, snickerdoodles for Emma. The familiar rhythm of measuring, mixing, and timing helped calm my nerves. By noon, the house smelled of sugar and spice, a welcome change from the lingering scent of funeral flowers that had permeated everything for days. The doorbell rang at 1 o'clock. I opened it to find James standing there with Liam and Emma, both looking subdued but brightening when they saw me. "Grandma!" Emma rushed forward, wrapping her arms around my waist. At 12, she was at that in-between stage, sometimes a child, sometimes trying so hard to be grown up. Today, she was my little girl again. Liam followed more slowly. At 15, he was already taller than me, his features settling into a man's, but with George's kind eyes. He hugged me awkwardly but sincerely. "I made your favorites," I told them, leading the way to the kitchen. "And I thought maybe we could go through Grandpa's photo albums later. Find some good pictures for the memorial board at the company." "Cool," Liam said, already reaching for a cookie. "Dad says you're the boss now." I glanced at James, who gave me a small smile. "I told them about the will," he explained. They had questions. "Not the boss," I clarified, pouring milk for the children. "Just the majority shareholder. Your dad is still the vice president and runs the day-to-day operations." Emma looked thoughtful. "Is that why Mom's so mad? Because she wanted Dad to be in charge?" James and I exchanged a glance. "It's complicated, sweetie," I said carefully. "Mom says you and Grandpa never respected her," Emma continued, her blunt honesty painful to hear. "She says you always treated her like an outsider." "Emma," James warned softly. "It's all right," I told him, then turned to my granddaughter. "Your mother and I have had our differences, but I've always wanted this family to be whole and happy." Then, "Why is Mom staying at Aunt Cynthia's?" Emma pressed. "Why won't Dad talk to her?" James looked uncomfortable. "Em, we've discussed this. Mom and I need some time apart to figure things out." "Because she cheated," Liam said flatly. "Because she lied." Emma's face flushed. "She said she was sorry. She said it was just once and it didn't mean anything." The tension in the room thickened. I stepped in, keeping my voice gentle but firm. "Your parents need to work through some adult problems. It's not for us to judge or take sides. What's important is that you both know how much you're loved. By your mom, by your dad, by me." Emma looked down at her cookie, breaking it into small pieces. "I just want everything to go back to normal." "I know, sweetheart," I said, reaching across to squeeze her hand. "Sometimes that's not possible, but we find a new normal. One step at a time." The rest of the afternoon passed more peacefully. We looked through photo albums, the children laughing at pictures of their father as a boy, at George's 1970s sideburns, at my outdated hairstyles. We selected photos for the memorial. George breaking ground on his first major project, George and James at the company's 25th anniversary party, George with his arm around me at the opening of the new headquarters building. The doorbell rang. Just as we were finishing dinner, James frowned. "Are you expecting someone, Mom?" "No," I said, rising from the table. "I'll see who it is." I opened the front door to find Harper standing there, her posture rigid, her expression unreadable. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back neatly, her makeup subtle. She looked like she was attending a business meeting rather than stopping by her mother-in-law's house. "Harper," I said, neither welcoming nor dismissing. "Madison." She took a deep breath. "I need to speak with you and James, together." I hesitated, then stepped back to allow her in. "We're just finishing dinner. The children are here." Something flickered across her face. Relief? Apprehension? Good. They should be part of this too. James appeared in the hallway behind me, his body tensing when he saw Harper. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," she said. "All of you." We moved to the living room, the children joining us with curious expressions. Emma sat close to her mother on the sofa, while Liam chose a chair slightly apart from everyone, his posture guarded. Harper looked around at all of us, then reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. I came to give you this, she said, handing it to James. He opened it cautiously, scanning the contents. His brow furrowed. What is this? A confession, Harper said quietly. And an apology. I've withdrawn my challenge to the will. I've resigned from the Charitable Foundation Board. And, her voice faltered slightly, I've arranged to pay back the money I took from the company 7 years ago, with interest. James looked up sharply. What money? Harper glanced at me, then back to James. I convinced Richard Whitman to help me embezzle funds from the company accounts. Almost $200,000. The room fell into stunned silence. Emma's eyes widened in shock. Liam's jaw clenched in a way that reminded me painfully of George. Mom? James turned to me. Did you know about this? I nodded slowly. Yes. I discovered it 7 years ago. I confronted Richard and made him return the money. He resigned. I kept it from you and your father to protect the family. James stared at the paper in his hand, then at Harper. All this time. Why are you admitting this now? Harper straightened her shoulders. Because I want to. Try to make things right. Because our children deserve better. Because. She looked directly at me. Because your mother gave me a chance I didn't deserve. And I've spent 7 years proving I wasn't worthy of it. I watched her carefully, searching for any hint of manipulation or deceit. But all I saw was exhaustion, and perhaps a glimmer of genuine remorse. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Harper continued. I don't expect it. But I wanted you all to know that I understand what I've done. To this family, to the company, to all of you. She looked at each of us in turn, her gaze lingering on her children. Especially to you two. I've failed you as a mother. Emma began to cry softly. Liam remained stone-faced, but I could see the slight tremor in his hands. What happens now? James asked, his voice oddly calm. Harper stood. That's up to you. I've booked a flight to Minneapolis tomorrow. My sister has a place for me to stay while I figure out my next steps. I'll send for my things when I'm settled. You're leaving? Emma's voice broke on the question. Just for a while, sweetheart. You and Liam can visit. We'll talk every day. Harper touched her daughter's hair gently. This isn't about abandoning you. It's about giving everyone space to heal. James stood as well. The kids and I should head home. It's getting late. Harper nodded, clearly understanding she wasn't included in that home anymore. She hugged both children, whispering something to each of them that I couldn't hear, then stepped back, composing herself. I'll walk you all out, I said. At the door, Harper paused. Madison. We'll talk, I said quietly. Not today, but soon. She nodded, a mix of emotions crossing her face. Then she straightened her shoulders and walked to her car alone, leaving James to take the children home in his vehicle. After they had all gone, I returned to the living room and sat in George's favorite chair. I could almost feel him beside me, his hand on my shoulder. Well, that wasn't how I expected this to end, I said to the empty room. But perhaps it wasn't an ending at all. Perhaps it was the beginning of something new. Not perfect, not even whole yet, but honest, finally honest. 6 months later, I sat on the porch of our Cape Cod house, watching Emma and Liam play beach volleyball with their cousins. James was at the grill, laughing at something his brother-in-law had said. Harper stood nearby, more subdued than she once had been, but present. She came to these family gatherings now as a guest, rather than a central figure, still finding her place in our reconfigured family. She had started therapy, was working at her sister's boutique in Minneapolis, flying back for weekends with the children twice a month. She and James had filed for divorce, but it was proceeding without the acrimony I had feared. Mind if I join you? Harper asked, approaching the porch with 2 glasses of lemonade. Please, I said, accepting one of the glasses. It's a beautiful day. It is. She sat in the chair beside me, watching the children play. After a moment, she said, I never thanked you. For what? For not exposing me 7 years ago, for giving me the chance to come clean on my own terms. I didn't deserve that kindness. I considered her words. It wasn't kindness, exactly. It was protection. For James, for the children, for the family name. She nodded. I understand that now. I didn't then. I thought. She trailed off, shaking her head. You thought I was weak. I finished for her. That I stayed silent out of fear or inability to stand up to you. Yes, I was wrong about a lot of things. We sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the volleyball game, sipping our lemonade. It wasn't friendship, probably never would be, but it was a form of peace. A truce built on hard-won understanding. George would have liked this, I said after a while. The family together, healing. Harper looked surprised. Even with everything that happened? I smiled slightly. George believed in second chances, in redemption. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, but the quiet kind. The kind that happens day by day, choice by choice, like you've given me. Like we've all given each other. Below us on the beach, Liam scored a point and whooped in victory. Emma gave him a high five, their faces bright with joy in the late afternoon sun. James looked up and waved, a genuine smile on his face for the first time in months. This was our legacy, I realized. Not the company, not the houses or the money. This, family. Imperfect, wounded, but enduring. I raised my glass in a small toast to the sky, to George, to whatever. Force had given us this moment of grace. To quiet redemption, I whispered. To starting over,